Today's session is brought to you by the Association of CNPs, the Professional Organization of Certified Nonprofit Professionals. One way the association supports its membership is by hosting sessions on topics that are on the minds of nonprofit professionals and our CNP learners. These events are always free. If you would like to support the Alliance to continue these free webinars, check the chat. We have dropped the link for ways to donate. Thank you for your support. And today we are excited to dive into the state of generosity with our wonderful speaker, Tim Sarrantonio. Tim is a director of community engagement at Union One, public speaker, and philanthropic psychology certificate holder, who has helped shape how thousands of nonprofits approach their mission by studying the intersection of technology, human behavior, and organizational structures in modern giving. Without further delay, it's my pleasure to welcome Tim. Take it away, Tim.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone, for joining. Thank you for that very warm welcome as well. I'm checking out the chat and just want to make sure that people can hear me, see my deck. Okay. Speaking of which, I have shared, as Miles has mentioned, that we will be sharing it out with the recording. So maybe if we want to put in the chat, we could confirm that we could see this beautiful face right here. And so just a tiny bit further about me in terms of that. Awesome. Thank you, Alyssa. Is that I personally live in upstate New York. I use he, him pronouns, by the way. I'm wearing a Let's Be Besties hat and a shirt that is connected to the show The Bear, which just started coming out today. So if there's any Bear fans, would love to hear that in the chat. Awesome. Good to see you too, right? And originally from Syracuse. Very cool. Love the Bear. Awesome, awesome, awesome. And so I am actually going to commit to getting my CNP this year. Yes, chef. Absolutely. I am going to, maybe if we're feeling good, let's go yes, chef at various points. So if you're feeling good, just randomly go yes, chef. I'm also chair of the Fundraising Effectiveness Project, and love it. And so that is something we're going to hear some data about, so I don't need to explain about that. But just like Karen Cooper, who has already beat me to the punch, I am looking forward to earning my CNP officially. But Neon One has been working with the Nonprofit Leadership Alliance in a wide variety of ways, as well as whenever you're registering for it. They have done some really cool things using our platform. But we are not going to be talking about any Neon One product questions in the least today. So if something like that comes up, or probably more pertinently, one of your interesting questions that I'll be paying attention to in the chat, I might parking lot it. And this is because, and this is why to the question, are you getting the deck? Yes, because we are actually going to experience a choose your own presentation today. There will be a certain point in this presentation where I will explicitly look at the chat and we are going to make an extremely arbitrary choice based on just how you're all feeling on where we're going to go. But there is a lot of things that we're going to cover. Let me know in the chat if this is how you currently feel, or if you feel a little bit more positive or even more negative than this. And so generally, we're going through a lot of things right now as a sector. The nonprofit sector is just facing a lot of really, really critical questions at this juncture. And I want to kind of pump you up and say, as somebody who's been in the weeds just as you, right? I got my start as a grant writer in 2008. And in Chicago, working at a day labor center doing anti-racism campaigns. I was not writing grants for very long. And what I want to assure you all, and what we're going to cover today, is that we are going to fight the vampires at the door. All right? We are not going to let these people in. We are going to protect what we have, and we're going to get a good understanding of what we have today. That's the state of generosity that we're going to cover. All right? So this is a hopeful presentation, but it's a realistic presentation. Hell yeah, Dawn, let's keep going. So we've seen the headlines, right? We're going to hear a bit about the Fundraising Effectiveness Project, and we're going to get some insights from that report. but we continue to prioritize affluence over affinity. And according to relatively new research from the Pew Research Center, only 34% of Americans say most people can be trusted. But in that research, it also outlined that basically 1 in 9 Americans don't even feel that they have a close friend, right? And so what we have is a divide that is ultimately very spiritual, that is very underlying our identity. And so we have a scarcity mindset in many ways as our default setting. And as my friend and collaborator Mallory Erickson pointed out in a recent session that we hosted on one with her, that there's a big difference between resource scarcity and a scarcity mindset. We need to address, and much of this presentation goes through this, that there are material resource differences between different communities, different causes, different types of places, depending on where you live or the types of work that you do. But a scarcity mindset is something that can be changed. We don't want to go through and be toxic positivity. It's all going to work out in the end. All of this is hard and all of this is work, right? And so that's what I want to kind of come in here, is that this is going to be a very realistic but ultimately optimistic presentation. And I think a lot through fractals. I almost want to maybe add an image of that. So if you don't know what a fractal is, it's basically something that maintains its shape even as it grows, right? And so think of a fern, right? As it grows, as it gets bigger, right? It maintains its core structure. And so what we're going to do is we're going to look at the very high level, the highest level actually possible. And then by the end of this presentation, you are going to see that not only you are not alone, but you're going to have some concrete ways that you can start to feel connected to your community, to engage your community. This is fresh off, hot off the press. This came out yesterday, the newest Giving USA report. Neon One is a member of the Giving Institute. I actually am helping co-plan their summer symposium event. So I hear a lot about this data. The too long didn't read is that a lot of people are saying, hey, this is a positive thing. And in general, if we look just at the money did go up, right? And so, yes, Beth, we will be sharing the slides because it is a choose your own adventure presentation, but we're going to look at some things at the high level here. And so in general, we should generally go, okay, 2024 seems okay. There is a lot of uncertainty. And I think what we're going to be paying attention to very deeply is what is happening moving from this year forward, right? Like last year's last year, this year's this year. But if we compare to what happened in 2023, generally the news coming out of Giving USA land is that, hey, this is a good thing. But I want to peek a little bit under the hood here, and that's what Fundraising Effectiveness Project is going to be helpful for. So would love to know if you've heard of FEP. I'm going to share some resources, but you can just go to fepreports.org. I'm wearing it, but it's being covered right now by my headset. But fepreports.org is where you can find all of these great resources. And so this is a data collaborative that has all of these providers. You may be using one of these companies or potentially even multiple of these companies. And that's great. What's happening is that we're looking at things on a monthly basis, and then we produce quarterly reports to say, are dollars going up? Our donor retention going down, things of that nature. And so when we looked at the same period that Giving USA did, the dollars did. Yes, the dollars went up. Now, FEP is completely different than Giving USA data. This is going to be a little bit of a nuanced, nerdy thing, but it's important. I always feel it's important to cite your sources. I think it's also important to live in nuance and understanding, right? We can't just have headlines dictate our strategy. And so the numbers are never going to match, and they're never going to supposed to match, because Giving USA looks at 990 economic data from the federal government. That's also why it takes a lot longer to get than compared to FEP. FEP is your work, basically. If you were using any of the data providers that you saw in that last slide, Neon One, Bloomerang, etc., then you're part of the Fundraising Effectiveness Project's data panel. Not every single nonprofit is analyzed. What we do is we say, okay, what do we think is generally happening across many parts of the sector? And so there's some exciting things that I'll talk about on how this is going to get even better. That's one of the things that I'm excited as chair is to go, what the heck am I supposed to do with this information? Well, part of it is presentations like this. So we're going to talk about donors and retention going down, but dollars going up. What does that mean for you? So again, when we're looking at kind of the overall trends, donor growth is going down. We've been hearing this from Giving USA and Lilly School for as well, that the general participation rate of households in the United States, and that could be defined as people itemizing their taxes, that could be defined as people who are declaring some sort of charitable gift. That is going. That's been struggling too. We're looking at it. Somebody enters something into a CRM, things of that nature, et cetera, and so forth. But generally, the kind of the soundtrack that I want us to break the record by the end of this presentation is dollars up, donors down. And that's because I want you to look at the size of things, because it's not enough to just go like people aren't giving. It's like, no, certain types of giving are struggling right now. If we look at the total percentage of people, what we're finding is that folks who give under $100, the ones that we're just like losing these folks. They're just not generally supposedly interested in philanthropy. And by the end of the presentation, again, I've said this is a very hopeful presentation. So even that is a bit of a misunderstanding if we take it at face value. People are not less generous. It's in our DNA. Our DNA is inherently structured to be generous, and we're going to talk about that. But how we distribute the money is of concern, because if you look at the supersize item, that 50,000 and above, that is 0.4% of all donors. And dollar growth, it's not that I want you to ignore this, it's that like this is nerdy data stuff that even I have to have explained to me sometimes, and that little bar right there is because we might see some kind of data come in a little bit later on, and it's going to adjust numbers. Long story short is that dollars, just like Giving USA showed, did go up. More money came into the nonprofit sector than not, and that's a good thing. Where there's concern is take a look at that supersize, right? 0.4%. But they represented 52.5% of the money. And so this is not a story about rich people that we're going to be talking about today. And this is not an eat the rich situation by any means. What we're going to do, and GoFundMe Pro, Brian, is included in that data, by the way. It should be noted. So not GoFundMe by itself, and that's one of the points that I'll get to later. I'm going to parking lot your point, but generally we are accounting for some of that, but not everything like a hospital fundraiser. So this is where the issue is that it's ultimately retention. And so retention is struggling. And we're going to talk about retention specifically of people under $5,000. But there is a survey that we are running for the Fundraising Effectiveness Project. And so that's something that you can go to fapreports.org if this is not working, for instance. But, just we want to hear your voice as a fundraiser, because when I show you data like this, I think we could do better. I think we could make more resources like what we're going to explore today. And that's partially what the point of this survey is. Again, if you go to fepreports.org, you'll be able to find the survey too. But I want your attention right now. So take a look back at me, because I have an opportunity for you. And so we're going to talk about specifically the opportunity around sustainable giving. Recurring giving is something that we're going to hear a lot more about moving forward, because that's usually where those under $100 donors are starting. And so Giving Tuesday has done some fantastic research. We've been partnering with them for years and even did some spotlights on recurring. But what we're finding is that most folks have around 6% of their donor base as a recurring giver. But the number of new donors is under 2%. So people who are coming in tend not to start their gift as a recurring one, or at least, are not doing it at a rate that Giving Tuesday feels could be improving. Because look at 2023, for instance, we did see some positive growth, but it's always around 2%. And here's the thing, and this is, again, more colored charts. The real underlying thing here is that when you keep people around, they give more money over time. Donors don't know. Like, I want to ask you a question in the chat. Do your donors know they're supposed to give you every single year? Like, are you just assuming that they're supposed to continue to give you money? Because I talk to people like Lisa Greer, who've written books on the donor experience from a philanthropist perspective. And she's the one that really got me thinking about that, because as a retention guy, I was like, well, that's interesting as a question. But Carol is correct. Giving Tuesday has also analyzed this, is that the biggest opportunity is that people are not being asked. And so, love that, Neil, right? And so, recurring donors are retained at much higher rates. Neon One has some research on this too that shows it in, again, the 80s and 90s percentage rate. So, when somebody shifts into, I'm going to give you a monthly gift, they tend to stick around, and that compounds over time. But the donor value, the dollar value goes up. They just have a higher value compared to non-recurring donors, and Neon One's research is going to validate that too, that I'll be sharing. And ultimately what they found is that if we just move that new recurring donor percentage up about 5 percentage points, so from 2, right, to 7, that adds $10 billion back into our sector. Basically the equivalent of what the Trump tax cuts in the first round ended up wiping out, because they ended up normalizing and removing some of the charitable incentives in 2016. And that was, by an independent analysis, estimated to lose about $10 billion. We're not going to get into it. I'm going to parking lot myself on this, but there has been some in that weird, beautiful bill that is coming out. And I'm not trying to get into the politics, but I'm talking about legislation. And so the legislation does have some things that are generally positive toward the universal charitable donation. But especially when we think about non-itemizers, you're probably going to be looking at these folks, the everyday donor, that represents 96.9% of people. So according to the FEP data that we saw earlier, one of the data points, if we total up all those people, is that 97% of people basically give under $5,000 a year. So we're not going to talk about the money. We're going to talk about the behavior, right? We know that especially the affluent, if they're asked, are probably going to give and continue to give. And that's what a lot of nonprofits prioritize. They prioritize asking the affluent. What I want us to do is to think about community in a much bigger way. It is going to be people who might give for a few years, maybe 1, 3, 5. They're giving 3 years, but not in a row. They're giving to multiple organizations. Neon One has a feature where we're able to actually analyze that. What about people who give, not just as a recurring gift, but as a pledge? Or members. We talk about the CNP network, right? Like that could be considered a network of members, and then connectors, volunteers, peer-to-peer fundraisers. Maybe they're raising money on behalf of something. Generosity is not money. Generosity, as we will see, is something that is inherently in all of us, and it is going to predate capitalism, right? That's just the monetary asset management of things. But what's within us is all of the behaviors that we're going to learn about, right? So I just talked about a few of these. So we're going to get into that mindset shift before we start to get into the choose your own adventure side. And so I have a certificate in philanthropic psychology from the Institute for Sustainable Philanthropy. I studied under Jen Shang, and one of the things that we learned there is that what is driving retention, what is driving that somebody wants to continue to give, is 3 core things within us that have nothing to necessarily do with the money outright. The competency is monetary driven in many ways. This might be defined in a very amorphous terms: impact, right? Do you do the things that you say you do, right? If you are a school, are you delivering on education? If you serve youth, are you helping youth? The other part is going to be whether that gift is given freely. Have you guilted people into it? Are you stopping them on the street with a clipboard and asking them to sign up as a recurring giver, and that's the only option, right? That's what some of the canvassing organizations do. And what this can do is, as we'll explore, is that this can have a negative amplification effect on even your work. All of this is connected, folks, because people want to be part of a community. This is not the same as buying something online, right? I don't have an emotional connection at the time of my Amazon purchase. I'm waiting for my stuff to arrive in the mail. And so what I think we get into is that and we're going to get into how do we encourage or model autonomous behavior, and that's community, in all honesty. A lot of this is that people feel like they're part of a bigger group, a bigger movement, something that calls them. And that's because what the strongest way that drives generosity, that drives these decisions within people, that models and encourages that autonomous behavior, is identity. The Institute for Sustainable Philanthropy identifies three different types of giving modes in a way, right? I'm not necessarily using the language they do, but the overall is that there's situational giving. They gave because they were asked. And so we might reduce our strategies down to we're not asking people enough. That's not enough, right? And also, that's bad advice. You can't just say go out and ask people for more money. You have to give them a why. And so a lot of times we get into a trap then into the second type of giving, which is relational giving. I gave because I have a relationship with this person. And that's especially major gift officers. They'd love to say, no, they gave because I did the work. And that's good. But what happens if that person leaves? And that gets into why this is the strongest type of giving. This is me. This is my giving profile. And so what we're talking about here is this is me. I personally believe that small actions lead to big change. I'm a incoming board member as a relational identity to my local community foundation. I applied. I'm just waiting to hear back by July, basically. But we're going to revisit this format, especially when we get into our choose our own adventure, because depending on your work, your mission, your infrastructure, your generosity experience, as we'll learn, it's going to be different. You need your own version of this to appeal to somebody. You need a core archetype of your community. Because if it's just like they gave because they're a nice person, guess what? Everybody can claim that. And so the issue is that most of the technology is not designed for what we've talked about. Much of the money driving it is not designed for it, right? What is this? The giving pyramid. And in my opinion, this encapsulates the scarcity mindset. And so the scarcity mindset is one that is not the same as what Neil is going through, right? There are legitimate structural issues and very scary things happening in our societies. But the advice that we are giving to kind of get around that, to address that, is to be able to say, look, uh, either you can automate your way to everything, right? I'm going to parking lot the board member question because that's very tactical and we will get there. But ultimately, you need to know who you are. And so you don't want to be led astray by technology companies, mine included, that are going to say, look, if you just automate everything, it's going to solve the problem. That won't work. And then you have the opposite side, the paleo philanthropists that feel that nothing should change, right? Like the strategic planning is going to sit there on a shelf. And so if you have a board of directors, for instance, that does not understand why you exist, it's going to get them to be, it's going to be hard to get them to care, especially if they're very business minded. You always have to remind people nonprofits may be structured as businesses. And yes, from a IRS, yada, yada, yada standpoint, they are. But the reason that they are existing is not the same as a for profit business. The outcomes are different. The outcomes are not monetary based, they are impact based. And that is very contextual. And that's why it's important to understand how your technology plays into this. It can help or it can hurt, right? If you publish an email and you get everybody's name wrong, they're not going to like you. If you publish a blog and it really resonates with somebody and they read it online, they might share it with someone. All of these have an interplay back and forth. It is very reciprocal. It is very reciprocal. And so when you get down to it, right, a lot of this is you need your core understanding, your core archetype of giving. And then when you get into questions like Neil's about accessibility or diversity of abilities, things like that, that again is a tactical understanding on, I know who these people are and I know what they need, right? If you work in a rural community, maybe you're not doing a lot of online auctions, for instance. You have to design the generosity experience to fit you and your supporters. So how do we actually do that? Well, first, let's actually understand our audience a bit more, because I think that we're woefully misinformed about how people actually give. And so Neon One has done some research about 100,000 people from a larger database of 31 million people. And we said, okay, what happened in the past 5 years? And so just like the Giving Tuesday data showed for recurring, people who give consecutively are going to donate the most money. So about 12% of people in our data set, and again, it's a randomized data panel, so numbers could change if we looked at all 31 million, but it's a pretty good sample considering that most of the research we hear from are surveys. They're at about a 1,200 person sample, right? So it's pretty big. So 12% gave for all 5 years, but they represented 45% of the money. And this is just people who give under $5,000. This is about $100 million that we analyzed, right? So we're not talking about the biggie wigs. We're not talking about the rich people. Every single person that we're going to hear about is under $5,000. That's it. And so there you go. And I love Karen, like, give some advice. I can't get to everything. So if you can help each other out in the chat, please do. And so let's even talk about communications, right? Oh, if we only ask them more. Well, here's the interesting thing that we found is that people who, even if they are giving for multiple years, they weren't actually increasing their engagement. So a lot of engagement doesn't have to do with how much you email people, it's what you're emailing them. And so we also found that just because that somebody gave for multiple years, right? Their first gift a lot of times was going to be under $200 no matter what. And we're going to hear a little bit more about that. But generally, as they continue to give, the dollar amount goes up. The dollar amount actually goes up. So what about people who give to multiple organizations? Well, we actually found that 70% of our panel didn't give to more than one nonprofit. So that was informative in of itself. But it was really interesting to see that the 30% of the panel who gave to multiple organizations represented the most revenue. That's not a head scratcher. That's just fascinating, right? I think that's just interesting. And it really kind of starts to upend our understanding of the generosity experience. And so we started to say, okay, but do they give to multiple nonprofits? And most people give to a single cause. About 60% of that group of 30,000 people, most of them are given to one thing. If they like LGBTQ causes because they identify with that, they're probably only given to that thing. But if they're given to more than one, then they're likely given to two. And that's about it. And so that's probably something that's connected, right? So you have intersectionality in cause alignment. A lot of times you hear about racial justice and you hear about economic access. Those things are intertwined because, sorry, spoiler, that's how history shows us they are. So people who deeply care about those structural things are probably going to give to multiple stuff. That's how I think. There was one person who gave to 12 things in the entire data set of 99,522 people. There was one person. We don't know who they are. I have no clue, where they live or anything like that. This is completely stripped of identification information. But it was funny to see one person gave to 12 things. It's like, are they just, doing once a month? Who knows? So again, we talked about this. Even with people who get who give to multiple nonprofits, they actually got less communications. That was really interesting. So people who give to multiple nonprofits didn't actually it didn't really impact things. So you have to be very careful and selective about how you email. But there are indicators that say, look, if you're doing more communications in a relevant way, that's great. So overall, my call to action is to focus on retention. We got about 15 minutes for the presentation before we open it up for more Q&A. We're going to come up to our choose your own adventure section momentarily, but really my big takeaway is please focus on retention as sustaining giving giant intellectual giant Ken Burnett said in a May panel that I had the pleasure of facilitating under the Fundraising Effectiveness Project. He said, retention is the new acquisition. Retention is the new acquisition. To retain $1 from a new donor, to acquire that $1 from that new person. Everybody's talking about events, talking about how do I get more corporate donors? How do I get all these different things? To get that $1 costs you $1.25. But to retain that person only costs you 20 cents. So that's how you get your board members caring. That's ROI. I do have a podcast. Started hosting with my coworker, Sam Nyland. Sam was actually she was a volunteer for the nonprofit that I was working at. I met her pre-Neon One in Chicago. And so she was doing some volunteering through her school. And just really we hit it off, and she's been at Neon One for a while now too. Very cool. So I hope you check out her episode, especially if you're a Neon One user interested in what we do. This month's episode with Eric Guzman, very cool stuff. So, okay, let's hear it in the chat, folks. We got a few options for our last 15 minutes here, 10 minutes or so, right? Keely said I could roll with some of the time a bit, but I want to kind of get into whether we want to learn about planners, so recurring givers and pledgers, members, or connectors, peer-to-peer, volunteers, things like that. What are we interested in? Let's see the chat. Do we want to hear about planners, members, or connectors? We got near 100 people here. I want to see a bunch of options. I want to make this hard. Make it hard on me. You've all been very, very active, so I don't know if we just if maybe everybody fell asleep. What are we thinking? If not, I'm just going to choose one of them. What happened to the chat? Are we still there? At least be like, I don't know. Yes,
What
Chef.
I'm seeing, Tim, is that there are a ton of people saying connectors. I don't know if that's coming in on your side or not.
My chat stopped working.
Oh, they're coming in fast for connectors.
Oh my God. Oh, it's because it happens so much. We're doing connectors. We're doing connectors. Okay, cool. Very cool. Okay. Don't forget, the whole deck is there. You're going to see them all. Okay, there was a bit of a lag, Keely. Thank you. Okay, we're doing connectors for sure. Yes, Chef, for connectors. So we're going to talk about event registrants, volunteers, and peer-to-peer fundraisers. So event registrants within our 99,522 data set in this beautiful report here. This beautiful report. Love it. Yes, Chef. They represented the biggest group. And what I really want to stress, this is so cool about how we approach this. I don't care how much money they gave. In fact, I would say about 35% of the things that people use Neon for when it comes to events are programmatic related, right? Like I do a clay class, a ceramics class with my children at least once a month through a client. That's an event in Neon. So don't think this is monetary. It could even be free. They just are showing up to something. And about 20% of people were that. Check out their giving overall. The blue line is the benchmark. That's the overall giving that we were just hearing about in that last section. But the event goers are a little bit higher, right? So this is a yes and Chef situation. Yes and. If anybody's and it likes improv, I'm sorry. No offense to our improv folks, right? Love our performing arts. We're actually at Act Fest in Iowa, Des Moines, Iowa, if you happen to be going to that or know people going to that. Stop by table 31. But like it's a yes and situation. That's kind of the big thing is how do you build community? Make it where your generosity experience allows people to say yes and. Because every single one of these people gave. So they're going to be generally higher, of course, in engagement than even the people who don't do anything else. They're more highly engaged than people who don't give. Now, where it's interesting is these next two sections. These are the most informative because volunteers, they represented about 3.75% of our panel. I think part of this is going to be the point that I make at the end on like, we don't see everything. Right. And so Neon's volunteer tools have only started getting upgrades. So I'm seeing more and more adoption. But there's still a lot of people that we looked at that tag people volunteers. And so that came into it. So we had a pretty good understanding. And check out what happens at year 3. It's pretty flat, but then it starts to actually really kind of increase. And that's where I think it's very exciting for when you think about retention. It's that yes and retention. Things start to really get exciting between years 3 and 5, and especially 4 and 5. And that's because you've built that muscle memory of the generosity experience working for them. And there's a lot of overlap between this group and peer-to-peer participants. I don't know if you're doing any peer-to-peer fundraising. Neon One is throwing a special event called Dream Big that you could check out on our website. Or I did post about it in my newsletter. If you want to check me out on LinkedIn, I guess I'm a decent follow. But about 1.48% of our panel are peer-to-peer fundraisers. And I just think there's a lot of beautiful opportunity with peer-to-peer. I think the biggest problem is that we burn people out. We ask them to do too much. And that's because we're feeling the pressure, right? Like we're trying to not wake up wondering how we're going to pay our employees or ourselves, right? My first job, I would just wake up in cold sweats all the time in 2008, 2009. I didn't know what I was going to do. And that's I don't want people to feel that. And I don't want people to make decisions based off of that. We have to be patient in some ways. And that's very hard. So when you get down to it, right? Like let's take a look at a connector example from Neon One World, right? This is an archetype that I've kind of designed for them. It's the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation. We work with all of their chapters. If you've ever done any of their peer-to-peer fundraising, especially in the last year or two, that's us. And so people might say, like, I believe in a cure and I love someone with cystic fibrosis. So I'm going to be a team captain for this organization and I'm going to be raising money for the national organization. Or maybe it's the chapter, right? Maybe you identify more with your geography. Maybe it's not the cause itself, but the fact that this chapter is doing some really cool resources locally. I've seen that with American Heart Association stuff in upstate New York where I live. So as you could see, you can modularize this framework in a way, and this takes time, but a lot of it's just very simple questions on why do people give to us? And so how can you actually put this into practice? So in the last few minutes, we're going to talk about that because identity is your biggest opportunity. It's not the money. It's understanding identity. The money will come if you know who your people are. So ask yourself, what motivates your community? Is it the benefits that they gave, right? Like arts organizations struggle with this all the time. People get tickets to the show. Is that the only reason that they're there? Okay, maybe you got to lean into that. Maybe it's reputation. Maybe they like their name on a plaque or a building, right? Maybe it's the story. Maybe it's the location, or maybe it's the fact that it helps a lot of people. We have to understand the why. And so Neon One, when we analyzed recurring givers in particular, we actually looked at 13,000 notes from donors, again, in a very secure and private, protected way. You can't just use AI. You don't dump a bunch of people's information into ChatGPT. But we did look at what they were saying. And so we actually found that common emotional sentiments were gratitude, love, honor, and memorial gifts, being inspired. Funny part about honor and memorial gifts, only about 1 to 2% of people actually click the box, right, to make it an honor and memorial gift in that point, right? So are you checking your donor notes to make sure you're getting the fullness of the story? And so a lot of times people might even leave some messages for you, right? Like, I wish this LGBTQ center was there when I was growing up, right? That's one that sticks with me from this research, is that one in particular. And so things like subject lines, things like the ability to leave notes, things like the images that you use in your website, all of this is connected. So a simple thing, so you're not overwhelmed, is just add a option to leave a note. Don't do a drop down. Don't make the choice for people. Let them just leave whatever they feel. And then analyze that. Then build a story or a plan around that. And then if you need more bite to that to get your board members to actually act on something, send a survey. Send a survey about motivation and communication preferences, right? How do you want to be communicated with? Now, donors lie. They would never admit that, but they do lie because brains are fickle. but at least you have something to act on. And so when you have that information, start to invest that back into the work that you're doing. Use that to drive you. Use that to inform the words that you use, the images that you choose. Speak to what is the core community identity and reinforce that connection between them and your work. They are not the center. They are not the center of the whole thing. Remember, it's a team effort here. Oh my goodness. We did it. We did it. I have something to kind of end things, but I'll click that at the end, Keely. So holy moly, I got it done right on time.
Gold star, Tim.
Yeah. I got a little bit more, but I will I'll just switch to looking at you in the chat now.
That sounds good. To circle back around to some of the questions, well, I see Neil has a question.
How do you comply with HIPAA obligations to protect the person and story? So one, I'm not a lawyer, so I don't want to answer that fully, but I will say that you can get media release forms. That's a simple one, right? Like if they give you if they give you opt-in to tell their story, that's okay. What you don't want to do is you have to give, especially for HIPAA obligations, if you're doing that, have a lawyer involved that is doing it in a way that protects them, right? One of our collaborators, Rachel D'Souza of Gladiator Consulting, talks about a story where she basically feels like she was used on stage at an event, right? Like as a prop. Don't do that. Ethical storytelling is your guide, Neil. That is going to be very contextual. It's not just a legal question on HIPAA. It's an ethical one too. Thoughts on working together with other nonprofits in your field that aren't in competition? What's competition? The real competition is what is taking people away from your work. It's not another nonprofit. So one, I highly encourage collaboration, especially on grant opportunities. But I think that we have to contend with the fact that you are working in an attention economy that desperately wants you to compete with Disney Plus and, you know, The Bear and House Hunters or Jeopardy or WWE or, you know, school being out, right? Like, you're not in competition with other nonprofits. What you're doing is you are trying to gain attention for the things that you all want to solve, and it's about finding the right balance there. And that includes mergers and acquisitions, by the way. I am parking lotting that too. So, okay. What else we got, Keely?
There was a bit of a callback, Tim, to one of your earlier points. Cherie asked, they have a client coming to share their story at an annual fundraiser, and they want to know how to make that person not feel like a prop.
I like the ethical storytelling framework. I think you could just Google ethical storytelling. There's also a conference, the Ethical Storytelling Summit, that was just last month that might have some resources. But ethical storytelling as a framework is kind of like, it gives you, it's a website. It just gives you kind of some guidelines to go like, ask these questions, do these things. So I would start there for that type of thing. That's a really good, just like how to be a good person. You know, it's not even that you're being bad. I think a lot of times people also like, they're scared to bring somebody on who's part of it because they're like, I'm going to do the wrong thing. And it's like, why did you make that decision for that person?
Right.
Yeah. Really,
no, that's a good start, Tim.
Yeah, cool. All right, what else?
Yeah, so Brian asked a question. He said, we are still in the largest transfer of wealth in history. How can we get nonprofits more effective at planned giving?
I mean, the thing is that the wealth is being transferred to, it's not being distributed evenly. That's part of the issue. And so it's not a tactical thing. Like, everybody should have a planned giving program. Like, that wealth transfer has nothing to do with planned giving. I can leave a planned gift of $50. Is it less meaningful? If I died and I only had a certain percentage because I was of lower economic status, and actual University of Michigan data validates this, by the way, that the less affluent give a higher percentage of their income to charity. So does that make them less generous? we have to rethink all of this. I'm sorry, I'm not trying to be contrarian too, but the reality is that the wealth transfer and the plan giving have nothing to do with each other at the end of the day, other than who is getting the money. That's a different question. And so when we're even designing our plan giving programs, are you primarily relying on wealth screening in order to do that? Because if so, I think you're barking up the wrong tree. It's about affinity. The reason that little old ladies give $5 and then suddenly give a bunch of money to the cat shelter is like that's a a story that gets told a lot because it's true. That a lot of affluent people actually test the waters with a nonprofit and give a few of those $100 and below gifts to see how they treat you. So if you were starting with the money question, you're just shooting yourself in the foot. Okay, I'm gonna put that one to bed. It's not a bad question. It's just one that gets me animated because it's like,
Tim, we enjoy seeing you animated.
yeah.
Okay, so I see a question from one of our viewers. They're new to their role and trying to stress the importance of an annual report to send out to partners, donors, supporters, but this idea is not well received. Do you have thoughts you can share on this, Tim?
Reposition it as an impact report. Say we're not gonna do an annual report. We're gonna give shorter milestone updates. Say, okay, fine, you don't want to do a big thing. I'm gonna do few digests that are 3 pages long of infographics telling a story, and you're gonna do that quarterly, and then you're gonna put that on social media. You don't need to do you got to get approval for what's on social media? Okay, work around it. Look, bosses sometimes they don't understand the story that you're trying to tell. So what you could do is don't try to bite off the whole thing. They don't like it, name it something else, reposition it.
I like that reframing, Tim.
Mm-hmm.
Can you
be like water? Be like water, right?
Agile.
Flow, agile.
I feel like that's hashtag working in the nonprofit sector.
Absolutely.
So, Tim, can you speak to what you think the state of generosity is, and what are the 3 things we can do to increase generosity in the future?
Yeah. So thanks, Dorothy. Look at her. Dorothy, if you may have seen an email about the generosity report, because Dorothy helped facilitate a lovely session at AFP Icon that I still think about. And so when there's a woman, there's a way. So I want to end with something beautiful to help answer Dorothy's question. Number one is that the data in this report, to kind of some of the things that people were saying, is a snapshot. I'm not really actually saying that there's 2% of people who give recurring gifts for the first gift. That's just what the data is telling us right now. What's the intention? What's the intention of the strategy? And so, one, every report you read is going to be missing large chunks of context. That is why you need to take all of this and make it specific to your context, your community. That's why I really want you to think deeply about that chart that I showed you. What is your anchor archetype? So that's maybe action number one, right? Is think about who is your core community. Because we're only telling part of the story here. There's a lot of things that we didn't pick up, or there's a lot of things that the data is not going to pick up because people are doing GoFundMe's. I paid my local JCC food, right? They're a client, a Neon. I am not checking into Neon at the pool if we go on this very hot day. And then when I pay at the pool, I'm paying some other person Venmo. But it's all part of the infrastructure, right? Like, here's the other thing is that all of this is connected. That's what I really want you to step back and look at everybody in this crowd and all of this, right? I'm not being kumbaya about this. Think about the butterfly effect. There is an amplification, ripples of all of these different things. So your actions have consequences, positive or negative. Are you putting good into the world? And how are you doing that? And the final part to kind of make that actionable is I think that everybody should have a recurring giving program, because to the planned giving point, research in the UK actually found that planned givers are more likely to come from recurring givers. So think of it as the beautiful entryway into your community. You're going to have people that will give you money every single month. Why not that? Why not that? Okay, those are my 3 takeaways. And to kind of help with that, I did also drop the generosity report. I almost did the recurring giving guide, Keely, but I said, I'm not sure if everybody saw the report. So I went with the report.
I think this is an excellent route.
Cool. That's what I got. And look, we can do more questions, or we can somehow give people 5 minutes back in their day, which almost never happens in a webinar. So that's up to you.
It truly never does. Yeah, I think folks who attended today are going to win one way or the other. I also will note that Miles plopped in the generosity report in the chat as well. And I think you did an excellent job, Tim, of answering everyone's questions. So I think it's time for us to wind down.
Thank you.
Ta-da.
Thanks for having me. Can't wait to join the CNP community, right? I want to make that part of my identity. You know that. So
I do know that, and I can't wait to welcome you into the CNP community. Although I kind of feel like you're like an honorary member already.
I don't want to be honorary. I want to earn it. So
we want those letters after your name. I think that's fantastic.
And
thank you for your time today, Tim. It's always great. You bring such awesome information and energy to all of your sessions with us. So thank you for your time.
Thank you.
For all of our attendees, as a quick reminder, the Association of CNPs hosts events like this one free to our viewers. So if you want to help us continue to provide these kinds of events, please consider donating. There's information on that in the chat. Also, check out our previous and upcoming events. That link is also in the chat, so you can catch some of our former events that we've recorded and get registered for those upcoming ones. So having said all of that, thank you for your time, your attention today, and we hope to see you soon. Thanks again, Tim, and everyone for joining. Have a great afternoon.